Hi everyone, I'm Josh Earl, one half of the Hoops Guys, and today I wanted to follow up on Will's excellent piece on tanking that was posted yesterday. Check it out if you haven't already. With some thoughts of my own on tanking. Now, like Will, I don't think tanking's actually really that big a deal. I think it's more of a media-driven narrative. And a lot of these teams are simply rebuilding, which isn't necessarily the same thing as tanking, which is the pursuit of a top pick by losing games in order to increase your chances. But we've seen some teams recently kind of follow that pattern and sort of be known as tankers. I'm looking at you, Philadelphia. So I wanted to ask the question, does it make sense to tank? There is a logic behind tanking, and you can get a sense of why teams think it's a good idea. For one, there's not a lot of franchise players in the NBA at any one time. And the way it's set up kind of makes it tough to acquire those players from teams that currently have those franchise players. So if a team has a franchise player, they're not really going to be that open to trading that player unless there's some extenuating circumstances, such as that player is about to become a free agent and they've already expressed interest in leaving, and therefore that team wants to try to get some value for them beforehand. But generally speaking, trying to trade for a franchise player is usually going to be a non-starter with the other team. And if you're trying to get a franchise player through free agency, you have to deal with the fact that the current collective bargaining agreement gives advantages to the incumbent team that makes it really hard to pry that player away. On the other side of it, there's a lot of reasons why the draft is viewed as the most logical way to go about getting a franchise player. Like I mentioned, you can't necessarily get the current franchise players, but what if you could get the next franchise players? And that's what those potential prospects represent to teams in the draft. And in the draft, when you pick a player, you have that player for 4 years, if you so choose. And on top of it, no player to date that has been offered a maximum extension to their rookie scale deal has turned it down in order to become a free agent. So it's not just those 4 years of the rookie scale deal you can have that player locked up for with your team, but generally speaking, it's more like three more years beyond that, assuming there's any sort of player option in that next deal, to 4 or 5 years after that first deal. So you can see how that might appeal to a team looking to get a franchise player that they don't have. And then, like I mentioned, once you have a franchise player through the draft, you then have their bird rights, which then makes it easier for you to retain them in free agency whenever they do eventually reach free agency. So there's a lot of reasons why looking to the draft as an avenue to getting a franchise player makes some logical sense. The draft actually has changed a lot over the years, and the biggest change happened just before I was born. In the 1984 draft, a lot of teams were criticized for seeming to lose games in order to get the highest chance at the worst record and getting that number 1 pick, which turned out to be Hakeem Olajuwon. And because of that, the next year before the 85 draft, the Patrick Ewing draft, they implemented the first draft lottery. And that lottery system, it's changed a little bit over time, but the current iteration, there are 14 ping pong balls that are selected randomly, and each team gets a certain number of combinations, and there's 1,001 possible combinations, but it's really 1,000 because the final one gets disregarded, and that way they have kind of this nice even number that makes it easier for calculation's sake. The worst team in the NBA currently has 250 of those 1,000 combinations in order to get the number one pick. In other words, they have 25% chance of getting the number one pick if they have the worst record. But even if they don't have the number one pick after the lotto, they're still guaranteed, at worst, the 4th overall pick if they finish with the worst record in the league. So what is the goal of tanking? We've kind of mentioned it in Will's video, but let me refresh just real quick. The goal of tanking is to lose games in order to maximize your odds of getting the number one overall pick so that you can best maximize your chances at getting a franchise player through the draft. But what are the odds of a team drafting a franchise player? For the purposes of this video, we're going to define franchise player as any player who has been an all-star and on one of the 3 All-NBA teams in the same season as their team went to the playoffs at least twice. And because the draft lotto was introduced in 1985, the same year I was born, coincidence? I think so. But since it was the first year of the draft lottery, and because it encapsulates my entire life to this point, I chose a population of all the players drafted from 1985 draft through the most recent draft in 2014. Using the aforementioned definition of a franchise player, I found that out of the 1,718 players chosen, that's how many draft picks when adjusting the first 4 seasons, so 85 through 88, 85 through 87 draft, they had 7 rounds. Yeah. And the 88 draft had 3 rounds. So I adjusted those to just 54 picks, which were the same total as the next 6 consecutive drafts afterwards. So that gave me the number of 1,718 draft picks within my lifetime. And out of those 1,718 draft picks, just 49 players, just 49 qualified as a franchise player. In other words, that's 2.85% of NBA draftees in my lifetime that are franchise players. Those players are, and pardon me if I read off a nice long list for you: Tim Duncan, Karl Malone, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Dirk Nowitzki, David Robinson, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Dwight Howard, Gary Payton, Patrick Ewing, Steve Nash, Chris Paul, Kevin Garnett, Scottie Pippen, Allen Iverson, Amari Stoudemire, Jason Kidd, Kevin Durant, Tracy McGrady, Ben Wallace, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Webber, Mark Price, Paul Pierce, Tony Parker, Anthony Penny Hardaway, Blake Griffin, Chauncey Billups, Chris Mullin, Dikembe Mutombo, Grant Hill, Jermaine O'Neal, Kevin Johnson, Pau Gasol, Reggie Miller, Russell Westbrook, Sean Kemp, Tim Hardaway, Yao Ming, Brandon Roy, Gilbert Arenas, Glenn Rice, James Harden, Joe Dumars, Paul George, Ray Allen, Sean Marion, and Vince Carter. Those are the only 49 franchise players who have started their careers in the NBA within my lifetime post 1985. Seems like there would be more, but that's it, 49. And let's just recap here. So, does tanking make sense? Well, over the last 30 drafts, only 2.85% of the players taken have become franchise players, the aforementioned 49. That said, teams with a top 4 pick, which once again, the worst record in the league is guaranteed at least the 4th pick. Teams that have taken, that have drafted in the top 4 have seen 23 franchise players in those 30 draft classes taken in the top 4 picks. That's a success rate of 19.17%. Not too bad. In fact, it's miles ahead of the historical odds of teams outside of the top 4 picks drafting a franchise player. Just 26 franchise players were taken after those first 4 picks in their respective drafts, and that's a success rate of 1.51%. So having a top 4 pick seems to be very beneficial for this, which does make sense because having a top 4 pick means you are picking from a larger pool of players. You have a greater opportunity to pick a franchise player because the pool of players is larger than if you were picking 15th, for instance. But despite teams with top 4 picks having a success rate of drafting a franchise player 17.65% higher than teams that are outside of the top 4 pick-wise, they have an 80.83% chance of not drafting a franchise player. Everything we just mentioned, all the benefits of getting a top 4 pick and the higher likelihood of drafting a franchise player with a top 4 pick, still equates to an 80+% chance of you not getting a franchise player with your top 4 pick and with the worst record in the league. So when you factor in negative externalities such as less fan support, whether that's ticket sales, merchandise, ancillary income from parking and concessions due to less people going to the games, when you factor that in, does tanking in order to get the worst record also that you can get the highest odds for the number 1 overall pick, or at least guarantee yourself a top 4 pick, does that really seem worth it when you only have a 19.17% chance of getting a franchise player in your draft? I don't know. To me, that is a bet I would not take. Hopefully you guys liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. If you wanted to add your 2 cents to the conversation, please comment below. If you want to share this video on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, wherever else you might want to put it, your local recreation center, post it up somewhere, like a link. However you want to do it, feel free. And I want to give a big shout out to basketballreference.com for all the information that allowed me to do this video. It's very helpful. I highly recommend, if you guys don't already spend a lot of time on basketballreference.com, you should. It's awesome. And most of all though, I want to thank you guys for watching. And if you want to see or at least be notified whenever our new videos come up, go ahead and click that subscribe button. We've got a lot of other stuff coming up soon that I think you guys will like. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.